Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I'll be talking about my thoughts on Assassin's Creed Origins after having done a 100% playthrough 2 years after the game's initial release. So, yeah, it's the 2-year anniversary of Origins. I mean, Origins is one of my favorite Assassin's Creed games. It's one of my favorite games in general. And at the time that I replayed the game here, it had been about a year since I did a normal playthrough of Origins. And by this I mean replaying the entire game, doing every main mission without skipping any cutscenes or anything like that. However, during this playthrough, I did every main mission, I did every side mission in the main game and in the 2 DLCs as well. And I had so much fun doing it. I really just fell in love with the game all over again. I am a massive Assassin's Creed fan. I have been for 10 years now. And I still think that Origins was a perfect evolution of the series, where it modernized the gameplay that did start to get a bit stale by the time of Unity and Syndicate. And while I do have some narrative issues and some lore issues with Origins, I do think gameplay-wise it's still one of the best in the series. The open world of Egypt is probably the most impressive in the entire series. I remember being mind-blown when I first played the game in the moment after the prologue where you ride over the sand dune and see Lake Mareotis and Yamu for the first time and realizing just how beautiful the open world was. Obviously, being in ancient Egypt, you have the pyramids, which were cool, obviously iconic sort of monuments for the game. And they're pretty cool to climb as well. I mean, it was pretty much like a puzzle trying to find the right handholds. But then again, at the same time, it is kind of annoying to slide back down them. I will say that the map does have a lot of filler. I mean, there are, 3 or 4 full regions where it's nothing but desert. And the cities themselves in the game are not that great either. I mean, they're pretty massive downgrade from things like Unity and Syndicate, where cities like Crocodilopolis and Memphis are kind of just annoying to navigate through. Alexandria is very just average overall, and Cyrene is decent, but it's really, really small. But again, exploring this massive open world of Egypt is still really fun to do. The horse gameplay in this game is still really clunky. I mean, you're really forced to use it a lot though, because the main game takes you through 2/3 of the map, and it does get really annoying at points when you get stuck on little objects. There is the follow road mechanic, but it doesn't really work that well. I mean, it works well in cities for the most part, but there's definitely a lot of points where you're in a sort of deserty area and it just keeps on turning around, not knowing where it's going. The combat system is still probably my favorite in the entire series, which seems to be a pretty divisive opinion because I see a lot of people really dislike the combat system here. But like AC Unity, I do think the combat here has a lot of depth to it, and I do love the use of the shield, the light and heavy attacks. However, I did play this on a New Game Plus, so I didn't really experience a lot of the good combat stuff here because, I mean, I could one-hit kill most of the enemies, so that's pretty much what ended up happening. Though, I mean, there was still some strategy. I mean, you still need to know when to use light and heavy attacks because guards can still obviously block your attacks, so you still need to know when to use the right one. I still stand by my opinion that the main game has some of the best mission design in the entire series, especially for the first 2/3 of the game. I think all the assassinations with the crocodile, the lizard, the scarab, and the hyena, I think all of those are pretty fun. The Medunaman assassination, the end of the snake quest, Gennadios, all those stuff is really strong in my opinion. However, I do think the back third is very weak. I do think the back third with a lot of Aya missions are just dreadful to play through, especially on a New Game Plus, where obviously on New Game Plus you become very used to having all the super powered weapons. But when you're playing the Aya missions, you're left with her really crappy weapons. You're forced to use dual blades, forced to use a pretty crappy light bow, and you're vastly lower leveled. It's not a fun thing to play through. And another thing about the gameplay is that I remember being mind blown the first time I played the game that there was this massive naval gameplay system within the game, and it is pretty intricate considering it's only 30 minutes of gameplay, if that. But I still find it to be pretty weak though. I mean, I think in retrospect, it does slow down the pacing, and really it's kind of unnecessary. It doesn't really need to be there, and to be honest, it's just not as fun as something like Black Flag. Now, as I said, this playthrough was the first one I've done in 2 years that I did all of the side quests, and I will say that a good chunk of them are still forgettable. I mean, that was my opinion coming into this, was that a lot of these were forgettable, sort of rescuing people from fort sort of quests or killing a group of guards, and that's still the case. But there are some pretty good ones. I actually was surprised at the number of strong missions within this game, especially from a narrative perspective. I think from a gameplay perspective, most of them are pretty bland, but I do think narratively, a lot of these build on Bayek's character, and I think that's something that this playthrough really made me appreciate even more so than I already did was how great Bayek is. I mean, through missions like The Bride and A Dream of Ashes, they show a lot of introspection from Bayek, showing his character development from how he was before Kemu's death and how he's moved on from it. We also get a lot of this through missions in the DLCs as well, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Well, other side quests like the Rujik quest line, the Son of Ra quest, Seven Farmers, they're all pretty fun quests as well. And something I didn't even notice until I played this was just the production value of these quests as well, where a lot of these have full rendered cutscenes. I mean, that's something that I didn't really expect, especially kind of coming from playing Odyssey a lot, where there's almost no cutscenes there. Half of the missions have fully rendered cutscenes? I think that's pretty impressive here. Now, from a narrative perspective, Origins has some of my all-time favorite moments in the entire series. I mean, the Rujik scene is a great introduction to Bayek. The memory corridors all have really strong dialogue between Bayek and his targets. The scenes where Bayek forms the Brotherhood are fantastic. Both the scene after the Battle of the Nile and also the scene where Bayek and Aya are on the beach. But I do think there's a lot of wasted potential. As I mentioned previously, I do think the back third is a complete mess. I mean, from the start of Blade of the Goddess, the narrative just loses track of itself. The entire plot line with Septimius and him trying to kill Caesar and then Caesar deciding to spare him, it makes no sense. Like, why is that a thing? The revelation that Flavius is the main antagonist is really underwhelming as well, as he's literally a background character until this is revealed, and then all of a sudden, just everyone's like, oh my god, Flavius, he's so evil. It's like, what are we doing here? The forced meeting with Proxila before the assassination of Flavius is just really dumb and breaks up the pacing of the endgame. Again, I know what they're doing there. They're trying to set up all these side quests that are in the Cyrene area, but it's like, this is breaking up the main narrative. Another part of the wasted potential here is how much of an afterthought the origin story is. And while we do get a couple good scenes, as I mentioned before, it is kind of disappointing, but at the same time, what we get instead of that is still pretty strong. I mean, we got a story about a grieving father and his quest for revenge and redemption for the death of his son. And to see his arc from the beginning of the game, with him training Kemu, to the final scene where Bayek doesn't force his ideals on the kid he rescues and agrees to take him home, something that he didn't do for Kemu, is a really great full circle moment to me. And from a character standpoint, I just love Bayek so much. I think after this playthrough, I am ready to say he is probably my favorite Assassin's Creed character. I mean, above Ezio, above Edward, I really do love Bayek, and I just wish we got a sequel with him. I mean, he gets a full character arc that's displayed through his relationship with Kemu, and he's masterfully acted by Abubakar Salim, who gives one of the best performances I've ever seen in a game, being able to show so many different ranges of Bayek's character. The side characters, though, just aren't written nearly as well. I mean, Aya is pretty inconsistent throughout the main story, and it never really makes sense why she's so loyal to Cleopatra over Bayek for most of the story. And spoiler alert for Legacy of the First Blade, I mean, replaying this just makes that DLC even dumber, because it's like, it's very, very, very clear that the Aya and Cassandra relationship is a complete retcon. There's no indication of it at all. And I mean, to be fair, I mean, I would have said that before I replayed this, but replaying this just makes it even clearer. Some of the minor villains here are pretty strong. I do like Tahaka, I like Medunaman, but a lot of the major villains like Caesar, Cleopatra, and Flavius are very underdeveloped. I personally really like characters like Hepzibah and Apollodorus, though again, they didn't really get much screen time. The modern day here is really bad. Like, should I even talk about this? I mean, it is playable, and I remember freaking out when we were first playing as Layla when I first played the game, but she's such a terrible character, and she somehow gets even worse in Odyssey. And again, there's still that really dumb moment where she's like almost murdered by Abstergo, and she's like, you know what? Let's go back into the Animus. It's like, what are we doing? But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much my thoughts on the main game. I still love the replaying Origins. I still think it's probably one of my favorite games of all time. But now let's talk about the DLCs. I mean, I might as well talk about them as well. I did replay those as well, so I still love the hidden ones. I do think it feels like a Bayek movie, and a lot of that comes from the way the story is told, the way it's presented, the amount of time that story takes. And for me, it also feels like the AC Brotherhood of Bayek's story. Like, I think obviously Origins is like the AC2, this is the Brotherhood. We're just missing the revelations, and more than likely we're never going to see it, which is pretty disappointing. But if we did get a Revelations, for me, it would be 100% clear Bayek's probably my favorite character in all of media. But The Hidden Ones does feel like a great epilogue to Origins, showing Bayek further cementing the Hidden Ones, and with this also being the origin story to the Tenet Stay Your Blade from the Flesh of an Innocent. From a gameplay perspective, this DLC is mostly assassination missions, all of which are pretty fun. I also think this DLC has some of the best side quests in all of Origins, with the Shrouds of the Scarab quest being a great display of Bayek's skill, being able to recruit Kawab, who was Taka's son from the main game, and he does it again in The Rise of Shakala as well. Character-wise, Tahira is given more to do here. Aya is just a better character than she was in the main game, and I do think she is better here solely as a side character than she is as a playable character in the main game. I also think Gamelot might be my favorite character that is like exclusive to a DLC, with him being the catalyst to a lot of the DLC's main themes. So again, overall on the replay, still love the Hidden Ones. It's a bit short. Again, it only took me 2 hours to do every main and side mission. It's not long, but it is really strong. In my opinion, of Curse the Pharaohs stayed about the same as well. I was actually the most excited to replay Curse the Pharaohs, as unlike Origins and the Hidden Ones, I've actually never replayed any of the side content for Curse the Pharaohs. And on the replay, I realized the side content just isn't that good. And particularly the ones outside of the Afterlife. I just think a lot of them are just so forgettable. I do think the side missions in the Afterlife have some pretty interesting character moments for Bayek though, and that's something. But to be honest, I was kind of let down by those missions. I was actually expecting them to be a bit better. I still think the overall narrative is all over the place. I mean, the existence of the Afterlife realms make no sense in the lore, as they're supposedly illusions created by the apple, but then Bayek treats it as if they're not when he's there, but then he also sometimes does during the side quests. Like, it's really strange. The structure of the ending is really strange, where you can play the ending before finishing all the main quests, which is just kind of dumb. However, during this playthrough, I was finally able to finish crafting all the upgrades. I had to kill like 50 scorpions to do so, but I finally did it. So overall, I left the Curse the Pharaohs still liking it, but not really any more than I did previously. So there we go. Those are my opinions on Assassin's Creed Origins 2 years after its initial release. I still really adore the game. I really do. And my recent replay actually, again, makes me think maybe I should have put it #1 on my Assassin's Creed list. I really think there's a debate for it. But that's the video. I do think I might do a similar video to this for AC2. I mean, next month is its 10-year anniversary. And I think it'll be fun to make a video where I talk about how influential that game is to me. But yeah, that's for the future. So yeah, that's the video. That's it for Assassin's Creed Origins. Thank you for watching.